Let's generate our motivation. So when we do things together with other people and we have similar experiences together, we tend to feel close to them because we've shared the experience, and so they understand part of our life, and we don't need to explain a lot. So when we think about all of our lifetimes in samsara and how many experiences we've had, good and bad and in between, and that we've shared all these experiences with other living beings, we see that we've had quite a long-term connection with other sentient beings in many similar situations, many intimate relationships, many ways in which we've been thrown together and have had to help each other and support each other. So even though we look different in this life and we may not recognize each other from previous lives, actually we have a lot of shared experiences. Recalling that, then just as we feel close to people we have shared experiences with in this life, then we can feel close to all the various sentient beings that we've had shared experiences with in previous lives. So even we don't know them, who they are now, we may live very different kind of lives in the past. We've known them quite well, and we've had many shared experiences and really supported each other through the ups and downs of samsara. So think about that for a moment and, have that feeling of closeness and familiarity with other living beings. So based on that, we can have a feeling of endearment towards each and every living being. And that feeling of endearment makes it very easy to wish them to have happiness and its causes, and to wish them to be free of suffering and its causes. In other words, to have love and compassion for them. And then based on that, we can generate the great resolve, wanting to attain full awakening, so that we can actualize the aspiration of our love and compassion and bring them happiness and free them from misery. And from that great resolve, of course, comes bodhicitta. So this kind of way of thinking of sentient beings as endearing depends on having some feeling for rebirth. Yeah. But if we can have that feeling, or even tentatively accept it, then we can see that actually nobody's really a stranger. It would be quite interesting sometime, don't you think? When you develop the ability to have the super knowledges, to look back in time and, oh, we used to play ping pong together. Yeah. Oh, we used to be at this place called Sravasti, Abbey together, fighting over the spatula. We have many common experiences. Yeah. So, if we enlarge our perspective, and have this big view, then, some feeling of closeness can come with each and every living being. And that's nice, isn't it? Nice? Do you feel close to other living beings rather than... that doesn't feel very good, does it? When we're like that. So it's really our mind that makes us feel close or makes us feel distant. Yeah, it's how we look at sentient beings. It's not them really. It's us. It's us. Yeah, so you can look at the turkeys and, gee, we share this environment, we have the same experience, and the deer and the birds. Are those they're little chickadees, right? We have lots of them. Yeah, that kind of go shoo, all in a group. So yeah, we're connected to all of them in one way or another. And so, that's the form of this life, but then it changes from one life to the next. And even in one life, it could be somebody that we knew earlier this life who passed away, then they take rebirth, they're in a different body, they come up here. Yeah, we don't necessarily recognize them. Although I must say, I'm waiting for Pat to come back and say, oh, I'm glad to see that you built Gautami and you built Chenrezig. And how about this temple? Have you started it yet? Pat was one of our neighbors, in the early years, an older man who, when we were doing everything out of this building, we didn't have the other buildings, and we knew we had to build something, and he kind of sat us down. He had experience with groups and things like that, and he led us through this exercise, so we could really see what is it that we need urgently at the beginning. And we decided, more places for people to sleep. And so we built Gautami. And he died not too long after that. And his wife, Jo, brought some of his ashes here, and they're right under the entranceway to the foyer in Chenrezig, the entranceway where you walk in and you see Kuan Yin, like right under it was under the concrete on the, what do you call it? Yeah. Yeah, it was under the footings. That was the word. Yeah. Because Joe thought that Pat would want to be in the middle of it all. Yeah. So who knows, we may get some child or some teenager coming up, and you never know what people are going to say and what people are going to do. So Venerable Tarpet did some homework here while we're waiting for this to get going. She said, my mind is unsettled because it lacks equanimity. And then, because we were talking about watching states of mind and then what kind of antidotes. And she said, undivided attention directed to my feeling aggregate is a temporary antidote to my discursive thought because feeling is a non-conceptual mental factor. Okay. So when you're watching the feeling, it, just plain mindfulness on it, that's non-conceptual. Can you keep that focus just on the feeling, or do you start discursive thought about the feeling? Yes.
One time during this retreat, about a month ago, I had I don't know why, I was a little stirred up. And I turned my mind to the feeling and all the thoughts stopped. And then I relaxed it and they all started up again. I turned it back and they all stopped. And I did that like 3 times. And I thought, and it really helped me to see the power of that. So I see some potential.
Yeah.
And also what I like about it, I have to say, is that it keeps me connected to the experience and helps the afflictions to dissolve, but without suppressing them. That's what I find beneficial.
Right, yeah. As long as you can keep your attention just on the feeling. Yeah. But that's the tricky part, because feeling is where we tend to be so reactive, especially if it's an unpleasant feeling, then immediately, the mind starts conceptualizing about it. Why am I feeling this? Oh, because these people, it's their fault that I'm feeling this. And then we spin our story. But yeah, so we just stay focused on the feeling.
Double check that it is a mental direct perceiver that's actually feeling an unpleasant or pleasant mental feeling.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't fall under a definition here, which I had marked, but I lost it now.
No, but this is according to Prasangika. Okay. They emphasize that. Yeah. And it really can't be anything else. Yeah, it can't be anything else. But the thing is, so soon after the feeling, then the conceptual starts of, I like this feeling, I don't like this feeling, why am I feeling it? It's because somebody else did this, why aren't they considerate, why am I always feeling this, blah, 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 blah. Are we at the beginning of chapter 18? The mantra of Manjushri. Okay, there, okay. So you see the below they have these stones all around the link, or the big circumambulation path around His Holiness's residence and the teaching courtyard and Namgyal Monastery, and you'll see people out there carving these in stone. Okay, so the mantra of Manjushri. In the traditional context of debate in Tibetan monasteries and nunneries, each session of debate begins with a communal prayer in praise of Manjushri. Also, as an auspicious seed at the beginning of every session of debate, each challenger declares, remember Omaratsa, Di Jitarjujan, which literally means the subject like Di, okay? And Di is the seed syllable of Manjushri, like his name, and it is the last syllable in the full 7-syllable mantra of Manjushri. So Omarapatsanti, we're chanting. Here is the mantra as carved in stone in Tibetan script by a Tibetan craftsman in Dharamsala, Himachal Pradesh in northern India. And so you can see it. So you can see the Om. Well, if we had it written out, then I could point the different things to you, but it's hard describing it. In the first, on the Om, at the beginning, the first syllable, the part that goes like this above at the top, that's the O part. And the circle above that is a M. So they say Om has 3 sounds, O, Ah, M, for body, speech, and mind of the Buddha. The second one is Ah, then Ah, Ra, Pa, Tha, Na. And then the D is the letter's quite complex. You have the Kiku at the top, which is the E sound. You have the Da underneath it. And then below that, you have a Ha. And then below that, you have the little thing that goes like this, which is like a Ah kind of thing too. So that's D. So as represented in loose phonetics, the mantra above is Om, Ah, Ra. Now he says Ba, Tha, Na, Di. So Jeffrey, the way Jeffrey writes out Tibetan is different than the Wylie that most people use. So I think he's copying that, because most of us would say Omara Pa Tsa, like TSA instead of DZA. So like Jeffrey spells Tsongkhapa, most people write it TS. He puts DZ, Tsongkhapa. Okay, so just different ways of doing the phonetics. Jeffrey has his own style. Like almost all mantras of Tibet, this mantra is Sanskrit, not Tibetan. And the image above shows the way the Sanskrit is represented with Tibetan letters. The Tibetans have a time-honored way of pronouncing Sanskrit that mostly reflects the way those letters are pronounced in parts of northern India even today, though it is not the universal style throughout India. I've always thought it was the Tibetan way of pronouncing Sanskrit. Yeah. Just like if you hear the very similar mantras in Chinese, yeah, like, Taita Om Gati Gati Paragati Parsangati Bodhisoha in Chinese is
揭谛揭谛波罗揭谛波罗僧揭谛菩提萨婆诃.
Okay, so that's how you say Sanskrit in Chinese. So I've always thought of, because we often get benza instead of vajra. Yeah, so I've always thought of it as the Tibetan way of pronouncing. He's saying it's copying how they did it in northern India. Yeah, we can check and see what it is. But anyway, it's quite different than Sanskrit is usually pronounced. Bolo Jedi. I've always wondered that. Do you get that? Yeah, Paragati to Bolo Jedi. Okay. Okay, therefore, there are some variances in styles of pronouncing the Sanskrit syllables. This is, he says, this is not a case of proper Sanskrit pronunciation versus the Tibetan style of pronunciation, which is what I thought it is, but 2 ways of pronouncing Sanskrit within India. So I would like to check more on that. For instance, the 4th syllable of the mantra above, Ba, which most of us, the way that's written in Wylie, everybody says Pa, so Jeffrey says Ba. And we would say Ba with the syllable was closed on the top. It would be a different letter. For instance, the 4th syllable of the mantra above, Ba, is more popularly pronounced in Sanskrit as Pa, and the 5th syllable of the mantra, Za, is more popularly pronounced in Sanskrit as Ja. 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 That's not, well, anyway. if it's pronounced in Sanskrit, fine, but that letter as it's pronounced in Tibetan is za, not ja. Ja is a different one. Thus, the more prevalent way of pronouncing the Sanskrit would be Omarapajanadi, which I've never heard anybody say. Arapajanadi, Omarapajana, is represented as Omarapakana, or actually the C is usually cha, Omarapachana in standard Sanskrit transliteration, but everybody says Omarapatsana. Everybody I know anyway. And that syllable is a tsa, it's not a cha or a ja. Yeah, at least as how they usually transliterate that syllable when they write in Tibetan. Now maybe, of course, if you're using a Tibetan letter for a Sanskrit sound, then it's not going to match exactly. Okay. It could be written as cha, so long as one understands that it is sounded without much breath. The way the Tibetans say these syllables, the mantra is pronounced as Omarabadzanadi. Okay. You know different Tibetans than I do. And both the ba and the za are sounded as high, sharp, and short syllables. That's true. Yes, it could be dialects too. And the dialects really pronounce some letters very, very differently. Yeah. But mostly when they try and transliterate things, they use the Utsang, the Lhasa dialect. Yeah. Although one of my teachers, Geshe Gyaltsen, was from Kam or Amdo. I think he was a Kampa. Anyway, the pronunciation was really, quite different. People have a hard time. I've talked to translators who are, when they're used to Utsang, the central dialect, to do Amdowa or the other. And I noticed when I was in Tibet, actually, even within the central area, Utsang, you just go over, a pass in the mountains, and the dialect changes. Yeah. And the sounds are different. And, yeah. Okay, in either case, the mantra begins with the sacred syllable Om, which is untranslatable, for the potency of it is in the sound itself. Even so, we may speak of the meaning of the syllable Om is composed of 3 letters, A, U, and These symbolize the practitioner's impure body, speech, and mind. They also symbolize the pure, exalted body, speech, and mind of the Buddha. You can clearly understand that Om is composed of Aum by voicing these 3 letters, although not as you would usually say A, U, and U if you were, or A and U if you were reciting the alphabet, but pronouncing A like the vowel in cup. Om. I don't know. And you like the vowel in boot. Boom. Oh no. An American pronouncing Tibetan that's pronouncing Sanskrit. I don't know. Om is usually the first syllable of a mantra because it commences with the sound Ah. And so it is very easy for the person reciting the mantra to loop it back around, beginning each round again with the Ah sound. That's true. Okay, which comes out of the throat without any movement of the tongue or the lips. Ah. Yeah. Okay, so Amarapatsana, I'm saying it my way, is a name of Manjushri, a mystical collective name of the 5 Buddhas. each being represented by a letter that is by a syllable. So the 5 Buddhas referred to the 5 heads of the 5 Buddha lineages, or the 5 Buddha families: Vairochana, Amoghasiddhi, Ratnasambhava, Akshobhya, and Amitabha. He put them in an interesting order. They aren't usually in that order. Almost all of the many Buddhas are associated with one or another of the 5 Buddha families. Since Manjushri is regarded as the manifestation of the wisdom of all the Buddhas, it makes sense that one of his names is drawn from all of the Buddha families. Okay, so I thought if you're interested in the 5 Buddhas, I could just go through them briefly. So each of the Buddhas, they're heads of Buddha families. So the Buddhas are kind of grouped into different groups, and these ones are the heads. I don't know how they got to be the heads, if they were voted in, if it's a hereditary position, if, somebody chose them. I have no idea why, okay? But each one corresponds to one of our aggregates, to a certain kind of wisdom, to a particular affliction, to a particular color, and then each of them has a particular symbol that they hold, okay? So Vairochana, in many mandalas, he's in the center. In some mandalas, Akshobhya is in the center. In Chenrezig mandala, Amitabha is in the center, because Chenrezig is in Amitabha's family, so that occupies the center position. But Vairochana, so Vairochana he's white, yeah, and represents the body, the form aggregate, and then the mirror-like wisdom, which is an exalted wisdom in the continuum of an Arya Buddha that realizes all phenomena of the 3 times, their ultimate and conventional existence, without any gap or obstruction. So knows all phenomena of past, present, and future. And the affliction that, is particularly overpowered by that wisdom is ignorance. Okay? And Vairochana holds a wheel. Usually just his hands are together in his lap, and he has an 8-spoke Dharma wheel. Okay? This corresponds with when you do the 35 Buddhas. Yeah. Okay. Then Ratnasambhava, and they also are usually in a particular direction too. But again, the direction changes according to what family the deity is, and so because that family is in the center, so they switch out. So the second one is Ratnasambhava. Yeah, he's yellow in color, he's holding a jewel, and he's the feeling aggregate. And so the wisdom there is the wisdom of equality, yeah, which goes well with the feeling aggregate, yeah. Try to equalize our feelings. So it's an exalted wisdom in the continuum of an Arya Buddha, that engages in working for others without partiality, so completely equal. And the affliction that is overcome is arrogance and miserliness, both of those. Okay, then the third one is Amitabha, and he holds a lotus. Okay, the prayer to Chenrezig, talks about him holding the lotus. He's red in color, and the aggregate of discrimination, and so his wisdom is discriminating wisdom, which is an exalted wisdom in the continuum of an Arya Buddha, which views sentient beings' thoughts individually without mixing them up. And he overpowers attachment. Okay. Then the fourth one is Amoga City. He's green and he holds a double dorje. Yeah, like there. And his aggregate is the fourth one, miscellaneous factors. The wisdom is all-accomplishing wisdom. So that's an exalted wisdom in the continuum of an Arya Buddha that is able to culminate actions for sentient beings, different purposes. So it accomplishes things. And that's particular against jealousy. Then Akshobhya, and he is blue, and he holds a Vajra, the aggregate of consciousness, primary consciousness, and his wisdom is the sphere of reality, or chuni. So it's an exalted wisdom in the continuum of an Arya Buddha who has eliminated the two obscurations, and he overpowers anger. Okay. So it's interesting, sometimes to contemplate these and, what's the link between the color and the affliction that's being overpowered, and they can also sometimes correspond with different elements. Okay, yellow is the earth element, and so on, things like that. So there's all these parallels. Okay, so it is suitable to recite this mantra in either the style the Tibetans follow or in the more prevalent style. Since English and Sanskrit are both Indo-European languages, but Tibetan is not, it may be easier for those reading this book to pronounce the Sanskrit in the more popular style than it is for Tibetans. However, the intent and devotion are the heart of it. One time, the great Kargyu Lama Kala Rinpoche told me a story, I think, because he knew I had studied Sanskrit. So the story goes that there was a yogi living outside the gates of a monastery, and one day a visiting student dared to say that the way the yogi was reciting his mantra was not the proper way to pronounce the Sanskrit. So the yogi was smoking a pipe. Don't ask me why. And for the story he was, I guess. And upon hearing this comment, he set his pipe down in midair and said to the young man, "If you can do this with your pipe, it is okay to say the mantra as I do." Yeah. So they often say too, say it the way your teacher says it. The teacher who gives you the lung for the mantra or the initiation, say it that way. And again, that it's more the feeling of connection and devotion that you create in your mind that is important. Really, when you look at how things are spelled out for Sanskrit and you look at how the Tibetans pronounce it, it's very different. So you can say it either way. You can do it according to the Sanskrit. You can do it according to how the Tibetans do. This mantra is intended to help increase intelligence and the power of speech. So when you're at any of the monasteries or nunneries in India, when you wake up in the morning, then you hear all the kids, everybody's running around. Somehow they're full of energy in the morning. And they're running around, And they're running around, brushing their teeth and washing their face and doing everything, reciting the mantra. And because the mantra, being related to wisdom, when you wake up in the morning, ignorance is usually the primary affliction because we're dull from sleeping. And so the idea of reciting this mantra when you first wake up is to clear away the ignorance so that you can focus during the day. And, students often do this practice before they take exams or before they study. So I guess it's a good way for your non-religious Buddhist friends who want to get good scores. You tell them to recite this. It gets them at least to say, the mantra. So it's good to do when you first wake up in the morning to do this. Yeah, in fact, I would advise, just as I've advised people to do a short white Tara every morning, I would advise in the Pearl of Wisdom. Does anybody have the blue book here? Yeah. Right at the very beginning, there's a prayer to Manjushri that is very frequently said, and he mentions some of the lines in it. So we used to say this at the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives, before the class. So I'll read it to you. Obeisance to my guru and protector Manjushri. And then you'll hear, as we go through this, he's describing some of the lines in here. Obeisance to my guru and protector Manjushri, who holds to his heart a scriptural text symbolic of his seeing all things as they are, whose intelligence shines forth like the sun, unclouded by the two obscurations, who teaches in 60 ways with the loving compassion of a parent for his only child, all wanderers caught in the prison of samsara, confused in the darkness of their ignorance, overwhelmed by their suffering. You, whose dragon thunder-like proclamation of Dharma arouses us from the stupor of our delusions and frees us from the iron chains of our karma, who wields the sword of wisdom, hewing down suffering wherever its sprouts appear, clearing away the darkness of ignorance. You, whose princely body is adorned with the 112 marks of a Buddha, who has completed the stages achieving the highest perfection of a bodhisattva, who has been pure from the beginning, I bow down to you, O Manjushri. And then you say, with the brilliance of your wisdom, O compassionate one, illuminate the darkness enclosing my mind, awaken my intelligence and wisdom, so that I may gain insight into the Buddha's words and the texts that explain them. So it's a short prayer, but there's a lot in it. You said you developed a way to chant it? Let's hear.
It starts with homage, which sounds better.
Okay.
Homage to my guru and protector, Manjushri, who holds to his heart a scriptural text symbolic of his seeing all things as they are, whose intelligence shines forth like the sun, unclouded by the two obscurations, who teaches in 60 ways with the loving compassion of a parent for his only child, all wanderers caught in the prison of samsara, confused in the darkness of their ignorance, overwhelmed by their suffering. You, whose dragon thunder-like proclamation of Dharma arouses us from the stupor of our delusions and frees us from the iron chains of our karma, who wields the sword of wisdom, hewing down suffering wherever its sprouts appear, clearing away the darkness of ignorance. You, whose princely body is adorned with 112 marks of a Buddha, who has completed the stages achieving the highest perfection of a bodhisattva, who has been pure from the beginning, I bow down to you, Manjushri, Omarapatanadi, etc. With the brilliance of your wisdom, O compassionate one, illuminate the darkness enclosing my mind, awaken my intelligence and wisdom, so that I might gain insight into the Buddha's words and the texts that explain them.
Yeah, it wakes you up. I don't think I could ever say it that fast. So the mantra is intended to help increase intelligence and the power of speech. First, settle on one of the two ways to say the mantra. either following the Tibetan style based on a less prevalent Indian style, or following the more prevalent Indian style. The English version is no different from the more prevalent Indian style. Note that there are only two main variances between the two styles of pronouncing the mantra, and both of these variances come in the mystical name of Manjushri. The more prevalent pronunciation of the Sanskrit name is Arapajana, which the Tibetans pronounce as Arabadzana, and which I say Arapatsana. The variances are in the third and fourth syllables of the name only. Those who follow the more prevalent style pronounce the Sanskrit pa, ja, and the Tibetans pronounce the Sanskrit as ba, ja, da. Experiment with both ways of saying the mantra. Pick the one you like and stick to it. In practice, the Tibetans typically voice the third and fourth syllables of the name pa, ja, or ba, za in a high, sharp, short tone, but no louder than the other syllables. This voicing makes the mantra more percussive, perhaps rendering it more effective for the increase of intelligence and the power of speech. Note once again that the Sanskrit name of Manjushri is represented here as Arapatsana rather than the standard Arapachana. The only variance, why is he going into this? The only variance being that it is spelled with ja rather than cha. There is a time-honored way of presenting Sanskrit in English transliteration that is often confusing for non-specialists. Almost invariably, those who speak American English will pronounce Arapachana as if it were Oarapakana, giving a ka sound for the cha rather than the cha or ja it is supposed to be, because that's one way when you transliterate Sanskrit. A C represents CH. Yeah, just so you know. I suppose it would be fine to pronounce it as ka if you can set your pipe down in midair. But it has nothing to do with the Sanskrit pronunciation in either style. The uniqueness of the way the mantra is recited shows not in the pronunciation, but in the way it is recited, and the way of reciting this Manjushri mantra is different than any other I know. In all other cases of reciting mantras that I know of, you say the whole mantra over and over again. However, for this 7-syllable mantra of Manjushri, you recite the whole mantra in the standard way 1 time, 3 times, 7 times, 21 times, or 100 times, and then you repeat, or you do a whole session reciting it the standard way, and then at the end you repeat the seed syllable D as many times as you can. With practice, you can build up your breath control, and you can time your recitation so that you start the repetition of the seed syllable with a full breath. Then it will be possible for you to keep the repetition going quite a while. So you got to practice that. According to the Malutra Rinpoche, the visualization that goes with the recitation of the mantra is that you imagine a small Manjushri in your throat and his consort Sravasti in the back of your mouth on the right side. Imagine that it is actually his voice reciting the mantra and not your own. Okay. So I learned a different visualization, that there's at the back of your tongue there's a syllable D, and I've heard one way that the D is standing up, another way that it's lying down on your tongue. But as you do when you're doing the D, you imagine light rays from the syllable D go in the universe and hook back all of Manjushri's inspiration and blessing and wisdom, and it dissolves into the D that is at the very back of your tongue. And when you run out of breath, at the end, then you swallow, and you imagine that you swallow the D and it goes down and merges with the D in your heart. So that's how I've heard it. So there's many ways. So the one note, I don't know from where in the text, is he saying Buddha is often called a deity or Deva or law. And this word is very, very confusing. So, because sometimes it can refer to a Buddha, it can refer to a Bodhisattva, it can refer to an ordinary being born in the the Deva realm, in the desire realm. It can refer to an ordinary being born in the form or formless realms. Because our universe, we have the desire realm, then the form realm, and the formless realm. So the word La or Deva can refer to many, many different things. So, when you read it, you have to be aware of what the context is and figure out what it means. The statue above there is Sarasvati. I think there's also one of her sitting. There's one with her sitting position. And people often mistake Sravasti for Sarasvati. Oh, you live at Sarasvati Abbey. And then about the prayer, according to Khenzer Yeshitupten, this prayer was composed by a group of Indian Pandits who planned that the next day each would bring a prayer to Manjushri. When they gathered the next day, they found that all of them had composed the same prayer. That's a nice story. Buddhism is a self-powered religious tradition as opposed to other powered religious traditions such as Christianity, because it holds that the capacity for freedom, liberation, or salvation lies within oneself. In Buddhism, this capacity is specifically in one's own ability to overcome all ignorance, the root cause of suffering and death, within one's own continuum, and replace it with wisdom, the cause of peace and happiness. But there is one branch of Buddhism, in Japan, the Amitabha practice, in Jodo, the Jodo tradition or Jodo Shin tradition, they specifically say that they are other-powered. Their founder said that, we cannot do it ourselves, we must depend on Amitabha. And so they do a lot of recitation of Amitabha's name and, with the thought to be born in Amitabha's Pure Land, and that Amitabha will, come and take them there. Okay? So they say quite upfront, that they're other-powered. So there's a Japanese temple in Spokane, and this is how they practice. We know the people. They're very nice. But most Buddhist traditions, are self-powered, saying that it's up to us. We've got to do the work.
I wondered if you could explain a bit about that has been pure from the beginning. Because he went through a lot of the lines, and some of them are more evident. But I read that, and it's like, has been pure from the beginning, and it's like, what does that mean?
Okay. I guess you could say, the mind stream is pure from the beginning. Yeah. The mind stream is untainted from the beginning. And when you clear away all the obscurations, then that purity that's always been there becomes obvious. So that's the way I see it. And I think the idea of a primordial Buddha is the same, that it's not really like this is a person who's been pure from the beginning, because all the Buddhas were once ordinary beings. So I think even in Nyingma, when they talk about Samantabhadra as being, the primordial Buddha. I don't think they're talking about him so much there as a person who's always been a Buddha who was never a sentient being. I don't think it's like that, because that would contradict basic Buddhist tenets. But don't ask me to explain what it means. Yeah.
Last week when you're reading the part about describing how he looks, there's this line that says, behind Manjushri's head is a halo, and there's a larger one behind his body. These indicate his luminosity and potency. So what does luminosity mean in this case?
Well, when you have wisdom is always associated with light, isn't it? Yeah? I mean, wisdom lights up your mind. It dispels the darkness. So I think luminosity is, along that line. And, most religions around the drawings of their holy beings, there's radiance, isn't there? It's the vibe again. You radiate a vibe of light because of the wisdom and the purity. Yeah. When we're depressed, are we radiating light? No, we're radiating, so, okay. So Tara radiates green light and, Medicine Buddha blue light.
The request, could we do, before we start the sessions, start now with Manjushri praise and the mantra as he did? I've learned it that way too in Germany.
Sure. Okay. So, chapter 19, the three purposes of debate. So the three purposes of Buddhist debate, or the three approaches in Buddhist debate, are 1, to defeat misconceptions, 2, to establish your own correct view, and 3, to clear away objections to your view. So when you read the debating manuals, they're usually divided into these 3 sections, starting with Dura. When you read it, they'll bring up some wrong conceptions and explain why those are wrong. Then they'll state what our view is, and then there's after that there's questions that people ask about our view because they're not clear on some points, and so that's the one to clear away objections. So this is kind of a standard format in debating texts. It is like the approach of a physician to remove what does not belong and to strengthen what does. Thus, for Buddhists, reasoning and debate are not ends in themselves or idle intellectual speculation. Rather, they are part of the path to spiritual wellness. For the purposes of Buddhist debate, they are part of the path to spiritual wellness. For the purposes of Buddhist debate are to move a person closer to the health of liberation through these efforts to remove mistaken views that do not belong and to strengthen correct ones that do. These 3 purposes are reflected in the layout of chapters in the commentarial tradition. He says that. Such as in the collected topics text. Each chapter is subdivided into 3 separate sections that together present and clarify the author's position on a topic. Representing 3 methods of approach to the central topic, the sections are refuting of mistaken views, presentation of our own system, and dispelling objections to our own system. These 3 approaches fulfill the purposes of debate. All systems of reasoning and debate extending to philosophical discourse in general and other intellectual activities as well have these 3 purposes. Within Buddhism, not only are the debate manuals laid out in these 3 sections, but an important portion of the Tibetan commentaries are also laid out in the same way. Okay? So it makes sense. It's a good way to do things, isn't it? You come into something, there's all sorts of wrong views around, so let's clear those away. Then let's say what it is that, we believe. And then in case we've misunderstood, let's clarify those misunderstandings. The first purpose of reasoning and debate is to refute wrong ideas and faulty reasoning. It is the nature of things that mistaken conceptions are prevalent. So the first purpose for debate is to dispel wrong views. And you can see that you can't learn anything new until you get rid of your wrong view. As long as you're holding tightly to a wrong view, somebody can explain the correct view to you over and over and over again, and nothing goes in. Yeah. So that's why there's always this refutation process that happens. And we can look at it, not just intellectually, but emotionally. When we're hooked into an emotion, somebody may come and try and present another way to look at the situation or something else. We can't hear anything. Okay? So the first thing to do to learn something new is to be able to loosen our grasp at whatever wrong ideas or strong emotions we're clinging to. Yeah. The psychologists have a name for it. What is it? Refractory, yeah. Yeah. And as long as you're under the influence of, you're in that refractory period, you can't hear anything. And we see that, don't we, in relating to people. So it happens whether you're talking about emotions or whether you're talking about ideas. Yeah, we're my brother on the tricycle. Not letting go. So this is the predominant usage of debate. For usually the reasoning is used to overcome falsities and misunderstandings. The standard way of refuting others' mistaken positions is through the use of consequences, and that's where you get the word prasanga and prasangika. Okay, the use of consequences of that mistaken position. If an idea is wrong, testing it and challenging it through considering the consequences of that idea will reveal the unwanted results that flow from that position, proving that the basic assertion is flawed. There are logical consequences of every assertion, so if an assertion is factually concordant, then reasoned analysis can confirm that too, and the consequences that flow from that idea will not inflict conflict with the basic assertions. But here, when they're saying they use consequences to dispel the wrong views, it's showing people the wrong things that can come about because of what they've stated. Yeah, I mean, we can see this in daily discourse when we talk with somebody. You're trying to decide on a plan of action, and then as everybody throws out ideas, then we try and see, poke holes in different ideas, because it helps us gain clarity about which ideas hold water and which ones are going to work and which ones aren't. Yeah? Don't people do that? You have a discussion, you're talking about if we talk about building a temple and where are we going to locate the temple, okay? And so somebody says, well, let's build it on the helipad, okay? Then, we're going to look and we're going to go, oh, is that a good location? Well, what are the ramifications of building it on the helipad? Well, first of all, when they plow the snow in the winter, they're not going to be able to put the snow there because there's going to be a building there, okay? And then second, huh?
County property. Part of the road system.
No, our property, it ends there, so it is our property. But it's right next to county property. The road is county property. Another result would be, you drive up and you bump into the building. Yeah. and you get all the traffic sound there because the building is, right where people enter. So we look and, okay, if you build it here, these are all the problems with it. And, when the problems get too great, we just say, well, no, that's not a good place to build the temple. Let's try somewhere else. Yeah. So then you say, oh, well, let's build it at the top of the meadow. Okay, what do you think about that? Is that a good place? Why not? What are the consequences? What? Yeah, we can't get up there in the winter. Okay. So for all the people who don't want to go to morning meditation, it's great. Yeah. And you don't want to go to afternoon meditation and evening meditation, then it's perfect for you. Yeah. Yeah, really. Okay. So then, when you're choosing, so just in ordinary things, we look at the result, And this is one of the things that is very good to do that, I find over and over again why, and especially with the inmates, the incarcerated people, but with human beings in general, it doesn't matter inside or outside the barbed wire or the razor wire. People don't think about the results of their actions. They're just thinking about, I want to do this, and they're thinking about a result, but the result so often is fanciful, and they're not really thinking, is this result going to, is this action going to bring the result I want? But they make up what they wish, I'm going to marry this person and live happily ever after. Yeah, right. So they make up results and believe them because that's what they want to, and then they act on those, and then they find out the reality of the situation. This just happened. Roger Stone, okay? So he's the guy. He's the seventh one of Trump's associates who got indicted. Yeah, and so he, he's been talking up to all the press. The day he got indicted, he went on all these talk shows. You just got indicted, a federal indictment for obstruction of justice and lying and so forth and so on. So what do? You go on talk shows and how you're right and the government's wrong and Mueller this and blah. Okay. Then he, on Monday, he posted on Instagram a photo of the judge with a cross, crosshairs, like what you see. Yeah. The picture of her, and above her is a picture of the crosshairs. And then the caption is about how, the whole thing is a deep state, and Mueller is, investigating from the perspective of a deep state. And, and he posts this on Instagram. Okay. And he's apparently his whole career, he's one of these people who likes being kind of out there and pushing buttons and stuff. So, so he wasn't thinking about the results of doing that action. The judge who was trying your case, you post on Instagram a picture of her with the crosshairs above and some kind of thing denigrating Mueller. Yeah. Yeah, is that going to go? What's the result of that going to be? Sounds like it. So, he went to court today and, she blasted him and said, now he has a gag order. He can't talk about it at all, And she said, I've given you 2 chances. This is not baseball. If you do it again, you're going to be in jail. And this is even before the trial. So, yes, Trump hangs out with really interesting people. So, yeah, like Putin. You were giggling. So this it's a very clear example of the point I'm making, is that we have an idea and we don't consider the consequences. We just have an impulse and we act on it, Or many of our views about reality or whatever, we have something that we heard or that we made up that we haven't really examined. What are the, if I believe this, then, what are the repercussions? And so that's why in debate, one of the first things you do is, your old beliefs are taken out there and you look and what are the consequences of believing this? So like him, what are the consequences of saying this about the judge in your case? So you see why I sometimes use current events? I mean, they really... You won't forget this point now, because, what he did is so.
I find that this has happened many times. I don't actually plan to do this, but this is how it works for me. A lot of times when I have to make a really big decision, what I do is I decide it kind of like in a preliminary way, but I make the decision and then I just live with that for some days. That seems to be the only way I can kind of feel it out and see where it will lead to. But I actually have to make at some level, like I'm going to do this, make the decision and then just hang with it. Otherwise, I don't seem to be able to flesh it out.
And see the consequences.
And I know,
the results.
Somehow I guess I know that maybe I haven't fully decided, but I do have to get to a point of a decision in order to be able to really think it through.
Yeah, so let me read that last part again so we remember it. There are logical consequences of every assertion. So if an assertion is factually concordant, then the reasoned analysis can confirm that too, and the consequences that flow from that idea will not conflict with the basic assertion. Okay. One of the things that discourage so many people about debate is that it can seem like just a game, rhetorical trickery used to embarrass people. It's not. Indeed, according to Lhasa Rinpoche, even when someone says something that is correct, a skillful debater can use consequences to draw out issues that seem to involve that person in contradictions. If an opponent says that something is such and such, then a skillful debater can push that opponent into accepting that it is not such and such. And if an opponent says that it is not such and such, a skillful debater can push that opponent in the other way into accepting that it is such and such. Okay, so what's the purpose of doing that? Okay, it sharpens your wisdom. Okay. Of course, this does not mean that there is no correct position in debate, but that a skillful debater is able to raise many qualms to any position. As one Tibetan scholar, Geshe Rapton of the Jay College of Sera Monastery said, logic is studied to train the mind in subtle reasoning, enabling later appreciation of the great scriptures. After developing his intelligence and discriminatory powers in this way, the monk is able to apply as many as 20 logical arguments to just one point of teaching. Like monkeys that can run freely in and out through a dense forest, our minds must be very supple before we can comprehend the depth of the concepts presented in the text. If our minds are rigid, like the antlers of a deer, we will never be able to reach to this depth. Okay? So he's really pointing a way to us, because as Westerners, we tend to learn something and just tell me what the right answer is. Yeah, I want to know the right answer. And then we know the right answer, we can repeat it back, and we feel like we understand. But there's so many parts to things that we don't explore, and as a result, we don't understand things deeply. And so I was thinking about it yesterday in the Vinaya class, when I said that in general, Shikshamanas and Shramaneris should not be reading the Bhikshuni precepts. People started asking a ton of questions. Nobody said why. Yeah? And that's the important question in the whole thing. Why is there this? Okay? Because if you understand why, then you can see where there can be exceptions, and why that's the general thing, and how to manage the issue depending on the person that you're talking to. Okay, so it's this kind of idea that when we're learning things, to really be able to look and and ask different questions so that we really understand something, instead of, oh, here's the rule and I'm all nervous. Maybe I broke it, or maybe my teacher broke it, or maybe we're doing something wrong and the sky's going to fall. Chicken Little, help me. Yeah, do you have Chicken Little in Colombia? Yeah? No. Truly American. In Canada?
Penny said to call Keela. He said, sky is going to fall.
Russia? No? Vietnam? No? Philippines? Okay. Detroit?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it comes from Old English.
Okay. Yeah. Australia? You have? Oh, okay. Yeah. So, yeah. I don't know how we got on the topic of Henny Penny. No, Chicken Little. Yeah, so why is she saying Henny Penny?
From where I'm from.
It's Chicken Little. No. We're going to have a vote. There's more people for Chicken Little. Okay, but meanwhile the sky is falling and we're just debating about who's saying it. Okay, instead of preparing for the sky to fall. Singapore? You have? Yeah? Okay. So, so what Geshe Rabden's saying is really good, He's really saying, don't just look for, what's the right answer and we take it, but ask questions about that. And so I think, some of the questioning we did when we were going through the layout of phenomena, I think that was quite good, because we said, why are they laying it out like this? And, and looking at, why? And some of the things made sense when we asked afterwards, and some of the things still didn't make sense. Okay. Debate serves to increase the agility. Okay, but then I press the space bar and it goes to a different page. But there's the monster on this page, so it's easier to find. One whose mind is not tamed coming at you, baby. He looks like he's made of plastic. We'll set one of our duckies. Okay, debate serves to increase the agility and clarity of a person's mind, supplying a critical attitude for investigating assertions. Of course, skill in debate can be used to embarrass others with rhetorical trickery, but the purpose for debate is not to defeat and embarrass a mistaken opponent, thereby gaining some victory for oneself. Rather, the purpose is to help the opponent overcome his or her wrong views. This true purpose of debate plays out in the three approaches that work together to enable a person to set aside wrong ideas and figure out correct ones. Yeah, so you have to be willing to be embarrassed and fall on your face, and and somebody tricks you, and then you see, oh yeah, I'm really not thinking so clearly. And so that helps you to learn to think more clearly. Since Buddhist debate in its natural setting has always been a spiritual practice rather than just an intellectual one, its core purpose is actually its practical application on the path. As the Dalai Lama said about this, if we are forced to choose between a sense of practical application and learnedness, a sense of practical application would be more important. For one who has this will receive the full benefit of whatever he knows. The mere learnedness of one whose mind is not tamed can produce and increase bad states of consciousness, which cause unpleasantness for himself and others, instead of the happiness and peace of mind that were intended. One could become jealous of those higher than oneself, competitive with equals, proud and contemptuous towards those lower, and so forth. It is as if medicine had become poison. Because such danger is great, it is very important to have a composite of learnedness, a sense of practical application and goodness, without having learnedness destroy the sense of practical application, or having the sense of practical application destroy learnedness. Okay? So he's saying we need to have a bright intellectual mind that can analyze and learn things, but not get stuck in that just being an intellectual pursuit, which, because if we get stuck in that as an intellectual pursuit, then it can increase our arrogance, our jealousy, our competitiveness, and that's not what it's designed to do. Okay? And so we need the practical application, because, otherwise, why really are we learning something? If it's not to practice, why are we learning? But if you just emphasize practical application without doing study, then you don't have much to apply practically. So this is, relating back to the Atisha, the Nagarjuna, about the 7 jewels of the Arya, why we need learning, but why learning has to be together with ethical conduct and generosity and wisdom and so on, so that it's applied practically. Okay? Quite important, this. Otherwise, really, somebody, and you can see this in some people, extremely bright, but it's like the Dharma hasn't gone in. And what really strikes me, the story I remember so clearly about this, some of you may have read Pelden Gyatso's book about his time in prison. So there's one story he tells, when the communist soldiers had arrested them, and he was there with a lot of other monks, and they were questioning one Geshe. The soldiers were interrogating one Geshe, and the Geshe just was terrified. And he was, don't kill me, please don't kill me, I don't want to die, and just totally freaked out by the whole thing. And Pelden Gyatso was saying to himself, this is an example of somebody who studied very well, but couldn't apply it. Because if he could have applied it, he would have known, we're all going to die, the time of death is indefinite. What's really important at death, keeping a calm mind, taking refuge. But this Geshe was completely unable to do any of that, because too much on the intellectual side. Whereas if you don't have any of the knowledge, then you get in that situation. And again, you want to do practical application, but you don't know what to apply because you've never learned. So, both. Okay. And so that's why it's so important. You know, you hear these teachings, you know, and then it's so important to go back and really think about what you've heard. Yeah. Not just, okay, we're done for Thursday. I'll open my notes next Thursday afternoon at 5:30, you know, before the class starts to remember what in the world we were talking about. So instead of that, but really going back and thinking about it and you know, what does this mean for you? For those who think themselves clever, these words are worthy of reflection. Which is really more clever, to win the battle or to win the war? You see the mere learnedness of one whose mind is not tamed plenty in the academic setting. That is why, yeah, that's true. That's why I never went that direction. I didn't want to wind up that way. That is why so many professors have the reputations they do. On the other side, for those who think that all they need is a sense of practical application and goodness, these words encourage learnedness. Okay, let's stop here because the next goes into the second purpose. Any more discussion?
I have this memory of one of our supporters bringing up her relative to the Abbey who had been a Lutheran minister most of his life and done a lot of good counseling people, but he was struggling with cancer and in a lot of pain. And in our short conversation, somehow we wound up talking about, like, you know, he talked about how in the church there is a debate around like whether God is permanent and what are the consequences. And it was like a deep emotional issue for him because in his suffering he was wondering, does God cry when his creation suffers? And if God is permanent, he doesn't. And you could see that he was really racked with doubt. And at some point he said, I should hope God cries. You know, like it was so painful to watch.
Yeah.
And it really brought to life, you know, we read these arguments in like the Pramana Vartika, right? It's like, okay. But to see someone living that consequence,
right.
And it made me think, wow, it's really very compassionate of Dignaga and Dharmakirti to elucidate these things because they're really trying to help us remove these wrong views.
Right.
But if you live them your whole life, because what I understand was he died in a lot of pain and mental
really?
suffering. Yeah. So very sad.
It's too bad. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, for sure. If your whole life is built on a lot of wrong ideas, and then, you know, I mean, he was tortured at the time of death between two different wrong ideas. Does God cry or does God not cry? You know, and tortured between both of those. Yeah. And so, yeah, you can see why it's really important to think things through and know what we believe and have a firm worldview that makes sense.
But how amazing that we actually have an alternative to look at.
Mm-hmm.
You know, 50 years ago, even in this country,
yeah,
you gotta believe it. You believe it or you don't. Pretty much.
Yeah. Then you see in the precious human life what it means to be born in a central country and how important having that criteria is, you know, and to not take it for granted. Or the criteria of being born at a time when the Buddha has lived and the teachings are still there.